Hello there. This video is for all of those who have ever wanted to learn about constraints in Autodesk Inventor and the CAM. We're going to use constraints to make this our last part of Activity 4.2 as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And who hasn't wanted to learn how to make a CAM or use constraints? They are very useful. So what are constraints? Let's take a look at here. When I go into a sketch command, the first thing I'm going to do is I'll show you how to use them. I'm going to make a sketch, work on the XY plane, and then you'll notice one of the tabs that comes up here, is this called a tab? This is a panel, right? And then there's tabs in here. Is this the sketch tab right here? This is the panel, the constraint panel. So you'll notice that the dimension and all of these little guys, I think shapes that'll make sense in a bit, are all in the one place. So a constraint is nailing down and making definite some aspect of your sketch or your model that you do not want to change. Oftentimes that constraint is a length or a dimension, but other times they might be what are referred to as geometric constraints, which are these. So let me just show you how a few of them work, and you'll get the feel of how to use them. Let's take a look at just a couple lines. So I'll draw a line. There's a line, and put another line down here. I'm don't really care. Whoops, where'd it go? Don't really care about its length or its angle or anything like that. We're just going to look at those lines. These lines are unconstrained. There's a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of ways that you can move them. You can grab them and simply move them around. I can grab a tip and make it longer. And it tells me then how unconstrained is it down here. 8 dimensions are needed. And then if I want to figure out like what can I do? What other ways can you move a line? There's this one right down here. This would say show all degrees of freedom. So it tells me I can move the ends back and forth. I can move the line up and down. I can twist the line. It can rotate. So there's lots of ways that it can move. And in some cases, it's okay if something can move or it's got a degree of freedom or it's not fully constrained, as we'll see down there. But a lot of times later in the model, that's going to be harder. It's going to fall apart because it's unconstrained. So I can get out of there, get those guys out of there here. So let's take a look at some of the constraints. We can look at, let's just take a look at the first one here. What does this look like? It's called the coincident constraint. And it looks as though we got 2 lines that are joined together at one point. So we would say that they're coincident at a point. Let's see if we can use them. I'm going to go ahead, click one. Let's put the end of that one coincident with that one. And there it goes. It's coincident. So I know when I mouse over, there's a little dot there. That's telling me it's been constrained. So now, although I can move it, I can move one. I didn't fix any of the lengths, so the lengths can change. They're not constrained. But what's always going to be the case is those lines are going to have to be stuck together or coincident at that point. Right? So what if I want to remove the constraint? This is sometimes the constraints happen and we don't even know it, and that becomes frustrating. So I can look at that, and I can go over here. And this is part of where you got to be kind of gentle with Inventor. And I'm going to pull it over there, and then I'm going to say delete that constraint. So once the constraint is deleted, I can move them or separate them again. So quickly, let's go over some of the other ones. What does this look? Lining 2 lines up. So there's a collinear constraint. Let's go ahead and see what that does. Hit both. Makes them collinear, right? So I can still move. Let's get out of the constraints. I can still move one of them around, right? I can still change one of their lengths because I haven't constrained those aspects of it, but I did force them to always be lined up or collinear. So I want to get rid of that collinear constraint. There's a couple ways that you can do that. I can hit this button. This tells us show constraints, and if I tap on a line or a feature, it shows me that. If you click on that one, it shows me that, so it's telling that. So I can grab that red one, I kind of move it off to the side, make sure I'm looking at just the constraint and not the line or the feature, and I delete it. So now I should be able to move one of these lines again and make it non-collinear. All right. Quickly then, let's take another one. Let's do this. What does this look like to you? Let's figure it out. Well, they're already done in that case, right? So it didn't change much because this is parallel. So let me remove, so if I just show you what it does then. Anytime I move these around, I can move one around, I can change their position, but they'll always be parallel. I can't twist this thing and make the other one not respond in a way that it's parallel. So look at that, woo, right? So that's always going to be parallel. I want to go ahead then and remove that constraint. So I can mouse over, usually find it, I drag that little guy up there and I say delete, and now I can move one and change it and the other one doesn't change. So this oftentimes happens, and this is, we can over constrain a sketch. So imagine this, that I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to go ahead and put the parallel constraint back on. Right, so what we've told them now is whatever we do, you can move them around at this point, but keep them parallel. And now I'm going to tell it to do this. What does this look like? These things are perpendicular, right angle. Watch what happens when I try to do this. I get this message up here. It goes, hey, dummy, I can't do both. I can't be parallel and at a right angle. You've over-constrained the sketch. And sometimes we'll find that, and that's what it means. It means there's something going on. We're forcing it to be one way, and then we're telling it we want to do something that violates that constraint. So we need to be sort of aware of what's happening in that case. So that's what we're looking at. So I can, again, remove those constraints, mouse over it. Show constraint up here. That's one way to do it. Drag that guy out and then delete the constraint. Now, I go back to my constraint tab. Uh-oh, what's happening? There we go, back to the sketch. Sometimes something happens and I got to figure it out as well. Sorry, got too many programs running with the recording and everything, so I kind of got off of the Inventor tab and didn't really realize it. So now my constraint should be removed. One way I can check for that is I can hit function F8. It's going to show me all the constraints, and whoop, I thought it was removed, but it's not. It's saying that these lines are still forced to be parallel, so I'm going to delete that constraint, and I should be able to do then, let's make them perpendicular. Hit that line and that line. That line, and now it's perpendicular, right? I can still move one of the lines around. We can move those. We haven't fixed those, but they're always going to be perpendicular. I can't undo that. So quickly get the idea. What are some other ones here? Well, what does this look like? Looks like parallel lines, but that's parallel counted off. So that's probably an equal sign. Let's see if we can make them equal. So let's make them obvious that it does something. We'll make one really long, and we'll make one much shorter. And then what happens if I hit equal? They're forced to be the same length. And again, you can see that glyph by my cursor there. That's still forced to be equal length. And there's also the perpendicular glyph kind of up here. It's forced to be perpendicular. So a couple of other issues we might want to explore here in this case. What does this one mean? This is sort of a surface, the hatch mark. So this would be a line that's horizontal. This would be a line then that's a surface, maybe a wall. This is a line that's vertical. Let's see if we can constrain one of these to be horizontal. Hit that, hit this one. And it does. And even though the sketch seems to be changed, all of those constraints are still okay, right? They're equal lengths, they're perpendicular, and now this one is horizontal. I am going to run into issues, though, if I try to make this one horizontal. So let's see what happens again. It says it's supposed to be perpendicular to this one, but so if I try to make it horizontal, I get another over-constrained message. So this is just an idea of what constraints are about and how we deal with them. And again, we can show constraints here by clicking on the feature. It'll tell us what the constraints are. We also have shortcut keys. Function F8 shows the constraints. Function F9 will remove the constraints. They don't go away, but they're not visible. So those are some issues that we're going to look at. Check out the next video to see how we're going to use some of the other constraints to make that cam really simply.